We are here for the candidates for Judicial Circuit 9, Group 9, Fay Olga Pappas and Alison Kerestes. I wanted to go ahead and get started with the first question. And it's a question that I think comes up in every judicial race, no matter what. And that is the question of what you believe constitutes an appropriate judicial temperament. That's a phrase that gets tossed around a lot, but I'd like to hear your take on it. And we'll start with Ms. Kerestes.
Well, thank you so much for interviewing with us today. I think that an appropriate judicial temperament is one that has a lot of patience and respect for the parties in front of them. Especially when pro se litigants come to the court, they don't always know what they're supposed to say or how they're supposed to behave, and it can take a lot of patience to help them work through that. So I would expect that I would always try to show respect to the parties and allow them an opportunity to be heard. Again, with pro se parties, they don't always know what the correct legal arguments are, so it's important for the judge to listen and look for something that they can rule on. I think the same goes with attorneys as well. Attorneys can come in very heated and very passionate about their case, and it's important for the judge to remain the adult in the room and try to temper emotions.
Yeah, and again, I would agree, of course, with what my opponent is stating. You know, I would bring to the bench the same qualities that any candidate running to be a judge should have. A judicial temperament includes the ability to not only be patient, but to have a great attention to detail, excellent time management skills, an unparalleled work ethic, and a commitment to professionalism that is necessary in our courtrooms today. However, where I differentiate myself is also in my steadfast belief in compassion. My desire to help people who have less, who need more, be seen equitably. I've been walking the neighborhoods of this circuit now for months and meeting the voters. They're struggling financially and emotionally, and they want their leaders to know they need help. Judges can and must be a part of creating solutions, and I want to be that kind of judge. A better candidate isn't a campaign slogan for me, and it's who I am.
The issue of pro se litigants, when you have somebody before you who does not know the law, does not know how to access the law, how does a judge set the boundary as to how far they can go to help that person? And what more can a judge do to make it easier overall for pro se litigants? And we'll start with Ms. Pappas.
Well, Chris, that is a great question. While shadowing our circuit court judges in family and domestic violence divisions, for starters, I've seen firsthand how at least one party in almost every case could not afford to hire an attorney. I learned that there were like these two swings per se to how a judge can control, what a judge needs to control in these circumstances. The first of these swings is simply controlling an attorney from taking advantage of the self-represented party's lack of experience and legal knowledge. But the second is also having to internally check yourself as a judge from giving or appearing to give any favor to the unrepresented party. It's a tough balance to make, but as a judge, it will be my duty. This is why Lady Justice is blindfolded. Now, I'm proud to say I've had, I think, the best judicial mentors. Hey guys, as your next circuit judge, I'll look unfailingly at the facts and the law of the cases, but I'll also ensure that people, represented by counsel or not, receive equity and justice from my courtroom.
Ms. Kerestes?
I think, again, one of the most important things the judge can do is listen. I'm sure there is a temptation to try to explain the law or explain what a pro se person can or cannot do, but it's important to remember their emotions are high and they may be in court on one of the worst days of their life, or they're to talk about the worst thing that's ever happened to them. So I think it's most important to listen and give them an opportunity to be heard. Where time in the calendar will allow it, I also have seen many judges refer pro se litigants to legal aid or the self-help center, where they can obtain some sort of free or low bono representation or assistance with forms or simple legal questions. So I think that that's mainly what I would do, is continue to try to listen and allow them the opportunity to be heard. Even if you're not going to rule in their favor, you should still always be showing them empathy. And then where time permits, to refer them to locations where they can get additional assistance.
I'll go ahead and jump in now if that suits. I'm Scott Maxwell, by the way. I'm a columnist for the paper. We've written through the years about the emergence of sort of specialty courts that have emerged in Orange County, veterans, drug, I think mental health. I'm wondering what each of your thoughts are on the value of specialty courts, whether they provide a role, we should have more of them, fewer. What are your thoughts? We'll start with you, Ms. Kerestes.
I have had experience with all three of them through representation of criminal clients and as a former prosecutor, and I think they're wonderful. They take cases off of the regular judge's docket, and they allow opportunities for people to receive services or assistance that they need, rather than just punishment through the criminal justice system. Especially in Veterans Court, I've seen people get back in contact with the VA and go through counseling and get the services they need to get their lives back on track. So if anything, I would look to extend them or expand them as much as possible. The only limitations I've seen is sometimes someone is either too ill or their substance abuse issues are so bad that the problem-solving courts cannot help them because it's just outside their parameters. And I really wish we could extend it to help those people as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Pappas?
So Scott, excellent question. We have some excellent diversion courts, such as for our veterans population, domestic violence victims, drug and alcohol addiction, and more recently, an eviction diversion court set up directly in response to the COVID-19 pandemic's impact on our community. So don't get me wrong, we do really well at creating specialty courts, but people are complex. It's never a single issue that brings them before the court. The better we get at identifying root causes and therefore are able to refer them to the appropriate services, the more likely they will never end up before the court again. And that's the point. From my experiences in these diversion courtrooms and in my continuing conversation with the circuit judges in these divisions, I've realized that what's currently missing is communication between these diversion courts and a continuity of care for the people who enter them. If it were up to me, I would create an administrative, call it the triage center within the courthouses, and I'd have it be run by social workers with diverse backgrounds in all of the issues our many diversion courts seek to address. In practice, it would look something like, a judge would refer a person in, say, their alcohol and addiction court to this triage center, where the individual's underlying mental health issue, which trigger the substance abuse, could be appropriately identified. Right now, all a judge can do is order a person directly to substance abuse centers. But then after they sober up, nothing stops them from relapsing and ultimately committing new offenses unless the root causes are spotted. This is why a collaborative approach between all diversion programs is needed.
Yes, thank you. I have a quick question for both of you, and it's a little more on the personal side. I wanted to know what specific moment or case or anything else, what was it that drove you to make the jump from attorney to running for a judge? Ms. Pappas, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Jay. Our court should be for the people. I'm going to choose my words carefully. Our court should be for the people, not political agendas. As we've all seen over the past several years, and more recently, the last few weeks, this has not been taking place. Who our judges are, what their backgrounds and affiliations are, matter now more than ever. First, I witnessed the appointments of people that I personally knew raised to positions of judicial authority without having the demeanor, temperament, and solid level of legal experience absolutely necessary to do the job well. And then, as we emerged from the COVID pandemic, I saw that our courts were overburdened with the needs of the people in our community seeking relief from issues like housing, mental health treatment, and domestic violence. I cared to find out how I could contribute to a solution. And I reached out to several sitting circuit judges in these divisions and asked to shadow their courtrooms. I did this for over 2 years, And I realized that in all of these areas, I'd worked in some capacity to provide relief and assistance to people just like those in the courtrooms I was watching. Whether it was when I was working at the University of Florida's Domestic Violence Clinic, or working at Legal Aid Society of the Orange County Bar downtown, or advocating for the farm workers around contaminated Lake Apopka, or representing the homeless in their fight for equal rights under the Florida Constitution as Southern Legal Counsel. Frankly, my connections to our community and my passion and proven record for working to resolve injustices, the stakes are too high for the same old, same old, and I had to step forward.
Thank you. Ms. Kerestes?
I would say it's more been a culmination of going to court every single day for the past 16 years. When you're at the state attorney's office, you're often in front of the same judge for a long period of time, and you learn how that courtroom works. But when I switched sides, I started traveling to courtrooms all over Central Florida. So now I've been in front of probably over 100 judges throughout the Central Florida area and even beyond at times. And I've seen how judges manage their courtroom, what their demeanor is like, how they manage their docket, how much time people have to spend waiting for their hearing or traveling to their hearing just to have it only last 5 minutes. And I kept thinking, if I were a judge, I'd do it like this. And so during the pandemic, honestly, my workload went way down for a while, as I'm sure it did for a lot of people. And I was able to spend more time thinking about it and deciding what's next for me when we came out of the pandemic and our schedules started to get busy again. So the time just finally became right for me, and I decided to go for it.
One of the big challenges that judges in Orange County and across Florida now face is a growing number of litigants coming before them who do not speak English or speak it so poorly that they cannot understand the proceedings. At one point, it was just one language that we had to worry about. Now it can be a dozen or more. And do you believe that courts in Orange County have adequate access to interpretive services that would give them an opportunity to have full and fair justice that they understand?
Well, in criminal courts, a person is entitled to an interpreter, but that's not always the case in civil. So I have definitely seen a need there. In the Osceola County Courthouse, in collections court, sometimes they would send people out to the hallway to look for someone else that could come in and interpret for them. And that just really felt unfortunate that they had to bring someone else into that personal situation. So I would love to see more access to interpreters across the board. I'm sure it's limited by finances, and I don't believe that the statutes actually require it in civil litigation. I once had a criminal case where the interpreter had to be flown in from Washington State because the clients spoke an ethnic dialect from the mountains of Mexico. It was called Non, and it was to great expense for the court. I think that they've now improved that, so a lot can be done with headsets, but that does make it difficult for court-appointed attorneys sometimes to speak to their clients before the hearing happens and not have it all just on the record, because the interpreters are only available for what's on the record. So I'd love to see an expansion of interpreters to the court.
So the short answer, do we have enough resources for interpreters, is no. As a civil attorney for the past 10 years, representing folks in Orange and Osceola County who have been maimed and left disabled, I can tell you firsthand, at least some 30 to 40% of my clients, English is not their first language. And of that percentage, the bulk of it, they will need interpretation services in my own law firm. But the solution is complex. I would say the first step is putting more money to the problem. The reasons why people do not apply to our 9th Circuit to become interpreters is the pay is too low. But that can only be changed at the state level, in terms of the state providing more funding to the 9th Circuit to raise the rates for our interpreters. And the second problem is, particularly since the majority of divisions are civil, not criminal, the majority are civil, it's on the burden of the litigant to pay for the interpreter. Of course, in my practice, things are a little different. We take care of that cost. That's not the same in other practice or any other practice areas. So the need is huge. I would like to see it be a top-down solution where we are able to get more funding from Tallahassee to make sure the courthouses themselves have, incentivized, well-paid, interpreters to help us meet this need.
If I could just follow up with that one a little bit. It's the fact also speaking about like non-English speakers and many immigrants that are coming to Central Florida, many of whom are not even in the midst of like a civil or criminal litigation, but are very afraid of even approaching any areas like the circuit judge, right? I wanted to know, what would each of you do, if possible, to make the office seem more approachable for people that are non-Americans and non-English speakers in the first place? If we can start with Ms. Pappas this time.
As a first-generation American myself, who has grown up serving as my family's translator, I have some thoughts on this. The first, again, is simply facing the realities. As a judge, I would prioritize ensuring that whatever interpreters are available at the courthouse, they'll be in my courtroom. Osceola County, more than 60% of the residents of the entire county are also from a Hispanic background, the majority of which are from Puerto Rico. And we have to, as judges, or God willing, as a judge, be responsive to this culture, and also be sure that we absolutely have a Spanish translator on staff. It's not just frustrating for all those involved in litigation, but it can be humiliating for a person to feel like they're stupid because they can't get their words out in English. So to have someone always there, in addition to my own ears, in addition to others who can help facilitate an immediate translation, is absolutely vital. But there's also things judges can do off the bench, and that's all about maintaining their connection to our own and my own community, going out there, meeting with people, not just when it's campaign season, but actually being part of the community. So that's a start to the answer of your question, but I look forward to being that kind of judge when elected on August 23rd.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Kerestes?
I think it's difficult to get them in there feeling comfortable. The first thing that came to mind for me was to use more technology. Again, going back to collections court, they have pretrials on an almost daily basis. And many of the counties started using Zoom and electronic means for that. And I was just so surprised to see the increase in pro se parties that would sign into the Zoom meeting that didn't appear for court. So I think making the courts as accessible as possible is the first step. We've got to get them there and then make them comfortable once they're there. It's just so much easier to sign in to a Zoom meeting and take 5 minutes out of your workday than it is to take a whole day or a half a day off to drive down to the courthouse and navigate the downtown one-way streets and parking and get yourself into the courthouse. So I think improving access to the courts as much as possible is a good first step.
I have a question that Ms. Kerestes, that for both of you, that builds on a point you made about organizational skills. I have found that most lawyers who run for judge, at least at some point in their career, think, I could do this better than the person who I'm appearing before right now. So I'm sort of wondering, what if you had to look at a problem that you see the most sort of on the bench, what problem is that? You mentioned organizational skills. I've also heard complaints about hubris or a lack of manners and respect, sometimes a lack of legal knowledge, maybe a political bent. What are the issues that you've seen that strike you as problematic from the bench? We'll start with you, Ms. Kerestes.
I think the two biggest problems I see are how long you have to wait for your hearing and whether the judge was listening when you talked.
Okay.
So I think that trying to work out your schedule to the best of your ability, because obviously nobody's perfect, so that people are waiting as little time as possible is the first thing that I would try to improve. And then when the hearing happens, I've talked to so many people who just felt like the judge didn't listen or had already made up their mind before they got there. So whether you think you know better or not, I think it's the judge's obligation to listen to what the parties have to say and make them feel heard. Because you might not be able to rule in their favor, but you can at least provide them that opportunity to say what's on their mind.
Great, thank you very much. And Ms. Pappas.
So, of course, I agree with everything Ms. Kerestes just said, but I wanted to add some additional points to that. We have right now an extreme backlog in our 9th Judicial Circuit, specifically in our civil cases. As you may have heard from other interviews, the criminal division is more or less caught up with its pandemic backlog. In civil, it's a very different story. Right now, our civil judges carry at least 3,000 cases each, whereas this is more than double what it was pre-pandemic levels. You know, I've been practicing complex civil litigation for more than 10 years. You know, in what is clear when you are at a small firm like I am, and you've had to manage successfully using those excellent time management skills and organizational skills you touched on, Scott, to handle thousands of these cases, is they're not the run-of-the-mill simple foreclosure matter, right? They're not. We're talking about, and part of the reason why there's this backlog is in any one of the medical malpractice or birth injury cases I've managed, it's included no less than 50 witnesses with elaborate medical testimonies, evidentiary hearings that last for days, and a requirement to maintain a continual diligence on keeping current and legal statutes and rules. You know, it's precisely my direct experience in these practice area that makes me exactly what our courts need right now in our next circuit judge. So in addition to the wonderful comments my opponent made, I want us to be aware of what's part of the problem in our 9th Circuit Court.
One of the things that judges, especially at the circuit level where you could be involved in, depending on what your assignment is from year to year, high profile murder trials, big dollar civil litigation, often a lot of attention is focused on the judge and her involvement in community activities, her, sometimes people go so far as to dig up your college papers and read them to try to figure out, get some insight on what you might do. How do you handle being in the community and still trying to remain connected to your community members and responsive to them, at the same time being perfectly aware that at any moment you could become the subject of intense scrutiny as somebody kind of paws through your background trying to figure out what you might be thinking or deciding? It seems like a huge amount of pressure that judges face that many others don't. I'm going to start with Ms. Pappas.
Simple answer: I don't focus on myself. As a judge, I would focus on the case in front of me. I'm just administration. I'm just there to make sure that trial concludes on time and that we get enough jurors to seat a jury. That's it. So to answer your question, Chris, I wouldn't be able to afford to have that luxury. It's not about me. It has to be about the people for whom that case just means everything for them, no matter what it is.
Okay, Ms. Kerestes?
Well, I think honestly, you can look at how we've behaved during the course of this election, because there's been intense scrutiny and criticism during the course of the election as well. And I think what we both try to do is just maintain our composure and move forward and know who we are and what our intentions are. I was a fairly private person before I decided to run for judge, and I've never been involved in politics before. So it's been definitely a learning opportunity for me. But I'm not afraid of people to know what I've been doing or what I've been up to. And I don't think it has any business in the courtroom. And I would just do my job to the best of my ability while I'm there.
I want to thank you both for some great and thoughtful answers to our questions. And I would like to just invite you both to make a brief closing statement. And just tell us why you think you would be the right choice for this seat. And we'll start with Ms. Pappas.
All right. Thank you all. It's been a great experience here today. And I couldn't be more grateful for the time you're giving me. So of all the votes that a voter can cast on August 23rd, I believe that a vote for judge is the most important. It's the judges in our courtrooms who preside over everything from traffic tickets, probating estates, adoptions, all the way to complex civil litigation and criminal trials that could include the death penalty. Judicial canons are not only something we are bound to, but they are very difficult to explain to the average voter. There are reasons why we are prohibited from talking about policy and positions so that when we preside, we do so in a free and unbiased manner. That's why when looking at who to vote for judge, the voter should look at who has endorsed them in the legal community, what organizations they know or are familiar with have said this person is their choice, and what is the background and experience the candidate will bring. You know, it's easy to say, I believe in public service. It's quite another thing to have nearly a lifetime of documented instances where I've walked that walk, not just talked it. And, you know, in closing, I'll just have to say again, our courts must be for the people, not political agendas. As we have all seen over the past several years and more recently the last few weeks, this has not been taking place. Who our judges are, what their backgrounds and affiliations are matter now more than ever. As you've learned here today and can see on my website, or talk to any of the hundreds of attorneys and community leaders who've endorsed me. I'm not the better candidate because it's a slogan. It's who I am and who I'll be as your next circuit court judge with your vote on or before August 23rd. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Kerestes.
Yes, well, I'd just like to remind the voters of the experience that I do have. I spent the first half of my 16-year legal career as a prosecutor, where I handled everything from battery, domestic violence to sex crimes, including the commitment of sexually violent predators. I've spent the second half of my career as a business owner. I own my own law firm, and I've practiced civil, criminal defense, a little bit of family, foreclosure, landlord-tenant. And I think that variety in my background is what gives me the advantage. I've had over 45 jury trials, and I've gone to court somewhere in Central Florida nearly every day of my career. When we look to who we want on the bench, we want someone with a varied background who is able to look at a case from both sides and has that perspective. It's often missing when a new judge comes on the bench, and I have it. I think that I'm the best candidate for the position in this race because of my background and my life experience. And I'd ask that the voters vote for me, Alison Kerestes, on or before August 23rd.
Thank you very much. And just to remind everybody, it is August 23rd, and everybody can vote in this race regardless of party affiliation. And I thank you both, and I wish you both good luck.